Good morning, everybody. This is our Friday morning West Coast United States Space Show program. It's actually the first program of 2026, and we are glad to be here with some of our Space Show key advisors, Dr. Kathari, who is actually in India right now delivering some papers, Bill Gowan and John Hunt, and of course our star for the hour, Jatan Mehta. This show will be an hour because it's close to midnight in India. So both Dr. Kathari and Jatan are in India right now. And when this show ends, I will make a couple of year-end announcements, but I want to get with it. Jatan has made lots of significant contributions to the field of space and science. He has a newsletter which you can subscribe to free of charge, Moon Monday. Um, he works with the Indian Space Progress, which is a monthly report on India's space capabilities. He's part of Open Lunar Foundation as the science communications lead. And then he is an adjunct scholar with Taka Sheila. Hope I pronounced that right and didn't totally ruin it. And he
Sheila.
contributes to their
That's okay.
space-related activities. And he's incredibly well known. His work is global. He is a poet with lunar and space poetry. You can read about him. He has a full bio on the space show. And Jatan, welcome. Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm looking forward to more encounters with you as time goes on. And how are you today? And thank you for staying up late and doing this close to midnight. And again, Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, thank you, David. No problem at all. I'm glad to be here, and I'm doing good. Happy New Year to you as well, and as well as to the all the other guests and people joining. Um, I, I'm doing well, and I'm just looking forward to restarting work in the new year because there's lots of moon missions to cover.
Why don't you start out and so a lot of our listeners may not be familiar with you or your newsletter. Introduce us to your work, to Moon Monday, yeah, Moon Monday, and your poetry and what you do and why and when did you start?
Sure. Can I use the share screen function if that's available? That will make it easier.
Yeah, so Bill, what do? I click on share,
So I just sent a request and you
Send the
should be
request.
able
You
to
but
see.
don't I have to activate it too?
No, no, no.
do you see
Okay,
a
I got it. I see it now. So just
Okay,
give me a
there.
minute.
Okay,
Okay, I should
yeah.
be sharing my screen right now.
okay.
Yes, you are. Yeah, we can
Great.
see it.
All right. So hey everyone. Nice to meet you again. And so I am Jatan Mehta. I'm a space writer and journalist at heart. I cover space missions, and over the last 5 years, I've been focusing on covering moon missions. And the reason for that is, as you know, that we are trying to send humans back to the moon again. And this time it's from both the US as well as from China. And there are many other countries also in the mix who are sending not only their first robotic missions, but increasingly complex moon missions and are participating in these crewed programs as well by the US as well as from China. So I think that it's an incredible thing that we are focusing on the moon again after all these decades that we have lost. Apollo was a high moment for humanity, but it's a high moment that we left for decades, and we didn't really do much banking on that momentum. And this time we are trying again, and hopefully, it will sustain. And I think it's a very exciting prospect because this time it's not just two countries that are interested, it's many, many more. There's also private and commercial players in the mix. And so my motivation was that I would like to archive and document all of this development work and milestones that we are hitting in the lead up to landing humans on the moon again, and hopefully not just landing them, but also letting them stay in the long run with moon bases and such. So, with Moon Monday, which is my newsletter that David kindly mentioned, I have been covering this every Monday for 5 years. So, I am on edition 255. as the latest. And come this Monday, the edition 256 will be sent out. So this is like a whole archive of moon missions sent moon missions and their developments every single week for the last 5 years. So this archive is free of charge. It's free to subscribe. It's free to browse. It's free to search. So I would encourage you to like look up the Moon Monday archive on Jatan.space. There's also a search button. So this should be good for full text advanced search for anything specific that you may be looking for. For example, if you're looking for Japan's lander, you could just do Japan and lander and it will show all the relevant results, right? So that's one thing. The other thing about me is that I also write an Indian space newsletter, and the motivation for that is even more simple. It's that ISRO doesn't communicate a lot. ISRO is India's space agency, similar to NASA for the US. But unlike NASA, ISRO doesn't communicate much. It only communicates the bare bones basics, and that's about it. And sometimes those even are not even in context. So that's a frustrating set of affairs. Even though ISRO is doing a lot in space, we are doing planetary missions, we are trying for human spaceflight as well. We are doing we are building heavy lift rockets. We have all sorts of Earth observation satellites, and so on and so forth. So it's an interesting set of activities, but is not being talked about and communicated well. So my motivation with that is with the Indian space section of my blog is to cover India's space activities in a holistic context. So this is a monthly newsletter that I write. And it's been going on for almost 3 years at this point. So I'm near to edition 34. So it's almost 3 years. So this covers India's activities across multiple space domains every single month, and so on. I also do critiques of Indian space as well as of moon missions at large, because as a journalist, I don't think I should be doing only praises of moon missions or space missions at large, because that's not my responsibility. That's not my job role. So it's also to critique. So I do that as well, and I think that should that's an important thing to do in the context of people not only setting realistic goals but also being realistic about what have we achieved in space and what have we not. Because we have seen this, for example, with uh, commercial space companies doing missions at the moon that are not as successful as they claim to be. And I think that's a dangerous proposition, because then you sort of lose sight of where you actually want to be and where you are, right? So I just think it's important to be honest about our progress, and that's the only way to take the next step forward. Other than that, I've published globally for various media publications, and I also speak at various events. So I've published for multiple outlets, including many that you might know, like the Planetary Society, Scientific American, Nature, and so on and so forth, Space News, etc. So links to all of these works are also available on the About page of my website. Basically, if you just go to my website and click the About page and search stuff, you should be able to get to anywhere else that I've been and I've done. Right. That's one thing. And lastly, to address the poetry part of your question, David. So I recently also published my poetry on space. For a long time, I had not done that actually. So I'd been writing some poetry intermittently on space exploration as well as other topics, but I had never really published them. But a few months ago, I decided to do that. And that's partly because I completed 5 years of Moon Monday. It also came with another nice milestone, that was um, having 10,000 subscribers on my blog and newsletter. So I thought that's a nice enough milestone on both ends between 5 years and that, to be celebrating it with something. And so I thought I'll celebrate it with poetry. So therefore, if you go to the poetry section of my website, you will find my poetry pamphlet, which has been published globally. It's available in ebook, it's available in print, an audiobook for accessibility as well, and so on. And the ebook is absolutely free of cost. Print can't be, because it's print, it's a physical medium, but the ebook is absolutely free of cost. So you can just download it directly from both my website as well as from various stores around the world, whichever you prefer. and read my poetry and let me know what you think about it. So it's poetry on space, not something that I've seen many others do. So I would be curious to know what any of you thinks after you have had the chance to had the chance to read it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any specific questions about
Yeah.
this or my work,
So
I would be happy to take them.
I do notice a conspicuous absence of anything about Mars or human spaceflight to Mars or O'Neillian colonies, which both, of course, are really popular topics on the space show and other space formats too. So why the absence of Mars and possibility of humans in O'Neillian colonies?
Right. So Mars is not exactly absent. It's just that I've written less about it. So if you like, I've written about, for example, terraforming Mars, and I've written about some of the Mars missions. I've written about Perseverance and how NASA decides landing sites, stuff like that. But I admittedly it's been fewer number of articles compared to the Moon. So that's a deliberate decision on my part that I think that Mars is more than well covered across the globe. It has its fair share of coverage across reporters, journalists, space agencies, shows like yours, and so on and so forth. So, in that sense, as an independent writer, because I have my own media publication and I'm running it by myself, my reasoning was that as an independent writer, I will be hard pressed to cover Mars uniquely in a way that's not being already done and to provide substantial additional value. And so I decided to focus on the moon as one of the reasons. The other reason is, of course, that the moon, as we know, is also a stepping stone. So without the moon, we are not really going anywhere. So the moon, and as Ajay also likes to focus on in his papers that I know of.
Yeah.
So that between those two things and moon missions not being covered in as much detail by any publication, as far as I am aware. That was the reason to start Moon Monday specifically and focus on it. Maybe in the future, maybe let's say 2 decades from now, if there's sufficient impetus or incentive, I could also imagine starting something like a Mars Monday.
Do you do outreach to school kids around India? What, if you do, what grades? And is it local? I know India is a big country, so
Yeah.
do you travel around or just in your local area?
I do outreach, so I do it mostly passively, as and when opportunities arise. But people do reach out frequently, like teachers do reach out, professors reach out from colleges and universities. So I've spoken like to students at various age groups. So anything from primary and secondary schools to high school and graduate, even graduate and postgraduate courses. So I've given talks on various aspects of space exploration, depending on what they want and what they want to hear about, and in schools and colleges across the country. But it's not been something that has been active on my side. It's been mostly passive and like as and when opportunities arise. So that's been one thing. And lately, I've also been giving just public talks at various venues. Because in at least where I live, Bangalore, which is in southern India, and where Ajay is right now, Mumbai, which is my hometown. In both of those places, there's a huge appetite in the general population for space topics, especially in the last 5 years, because
Yeah.
after India landed Chandrayaan 3 on the moon in 2023, the interest in space has skyrocketed, and that's a good thing. So people have an appetite now for space stuff that they didn't exactly before, or at least not at that scale. So I do give like lectures here and there, as and when, at the planetarium or even at some bars and restaurants and stuff like that.
Space show advisor John Jossi could not be with us, but he asked me to ask you a couple of questions. So I'll do that up front. So one is, he says, I found your poems very inspiring. Do you have any poetry training in school or elsewhere?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that kind comment. Please do relay that for me. I mean, I wish, I wish I had a poetry course of any sort. I mean, honestly, I'm just a poet who writes for the sake of it, like for the love of it. So I didn't really think about, doing it professionally or anything. But, if it, again, I don't really know how to even teach poetry, I just grew up learning, not learning, but like reading random bits of poetry from anywhere in multiple languages, be it Hindi or English or anything else. And it's just something that I like. And so I just something that I like writing as well. Uh, Again, these are like sporadic. So I will sometimes write a poetry, two through three poems in a week, and sometimes it will be years before I write the next one. So it's really sporadic. So I wish I could say that it's something I could teach, but I can't, at least not at this stage.
His other question jumps us right into inquiring about India's space program, and then others may have questions or comments as well. But he wants to know if the Indian space program, if you think it will be driven primarily by the private sector in India or the government.
I think government, at least for the near future, at least for the next decade or so, while the private sector has an increasing role to play, for sure, because the reforms for private sector that the US underwent decades ago has now finally happened in India circa 2020. And so it's too early for the reforms and its regulations and the national policy and all of its trickle effects to really be advantageous for the private sector to have a conducive environment to show their work at scale. So in that sense, the private sector participation will remain a minority for the foreseeable future, but it will like gradually increase. But in the near future, ISRO will be the dominant player. ISRO and the other related governmental entities on space that we have. But even when the private sector does, have a niche of its own and have products of their own that are competitive and doing well in the market, even then the role of the national space sector does not go away in a way similar to, let's say, you could imagine it similar to NASA, where even with the presence of commercial entities, NASA's role is distinct for the US and for the civilian aspirations of the US space program. And so sometimes even if you have like lots of commercial contractors into the mix, it's ultimately NASA doing the architectural work across them all, similar to, like, for example, the Artemis program. I'll not get into like the weeds here, but I'm just like using it as a broad analogy here. So in that sense, ISRO will still have a role to play. And in the national space policy that came out in 2023 after the private space sector reforms, one very important thing stands out, and that's something that should not be forgotten, is that ISRO is being explicitly asked by the national space policy and the legislation that follows to uh, focus on cutting edge R&D for space exploration across all of its domains. So in that sense, ISRO's role as a research hub gets reinforced and gets enabled through this policy, whereas others like commercial contractors and private players and so on will focus on the productionization element, and there will also be like things like tech transfers between the government and the industry and stuff like that. So essentially, it's not an either or question at the end of the day. It's both.
Where is India with their human spaceflight program?
So there's been good progress over the last few years, although the progress has been slower than expected. Although in some might also say that in with the human spaceflight program, progress is always slower than expected. But in any case, so India originally was targeting 2025 after to launch their first to launch humans in space in an indigenous manner for the first time. So that was 2025. This is after the 2022 date that originally made the headlines, but that was a political headline very similar to the Artemis 3 crewed moon landing in 2024. So that's not really to be taken seriously on either side. But 2025 was the first serious deadline that was set. Obviously, we have lapsed that, but the word on the street is that a case was made to the Department of Space and to the Government Union Cabinet and the Prime Minister office that uh, the safety of astronauts is obviously paramount, and to get human spaceflight right, you have to be doubly, triply, quadruply sure about the safety aspects of it. And so we decided to do like more stringent tests across multiple hardware elements. And so what we are looking at is that in terms of current progress, the launch vehicle that will be used for human spaceflight, called the LVM-3 Launch Vehicle Mark III, that has been human rated. So the qualification work for that has been complete. The propulsion module has been human rated. The crude module is yet to be human rated. Many other elements that will be used in the overall stack have been human rated. So in terms of the human rating qualification tests, we are like almost there, with the crew module being the pacing item. And then we have a series of abort tests and so on that have been going on over the last 2 years. They have all been successful. So in terms of covering every possible imaginable abort scenario that we can test, uh, more or less all of them have been done or are about to be done in a matter of few months from now. So that's on that front. And then we have a full-scale uncrewed test of the whole system. So India has decided not to do just two, but three uncrewed launches of the whole system before sending any astronaut aboard. So the first of those tests will be this year, sometime this year. We don't know the date yet, but it will be sometime this year, hopefully in the first half. But we'll see. So that will be this year, and then following the outcomes of it and the any changes that you need to make based on what we learned from that, you will have a second test, and then you'll have a third test after that, and then after everything has been proven to be working just as expected and verified to be so, we will launch humans to space. So according to this new revised schedule, we are targeting 2027, late 2027 as the first time Indians go to space on their indigenously developed vehicles.
What are
Fantastic.
your what are your space flight participants called in India?
Right. So the program is called Gaganyaan, and Gagan means sky in Hindi as well as many other Indian languages. And Yan means craft, as in vehicle, as in spacecraft. So Gaganyaan literally translates to, a skycraft, right? And skies as in open skies, so not just Earth skies. So the astronauts that will go in Gaganyaan will be called Gaganyatris. Yatri means farer. So sky, Gagan is sky. So Gaganyatri is skyfarer, literally. So yeah, we'll be having a skycraft with skyfarers, essentially. So I think this is a good juncture to also say and bring in the fact that do you know what Chandrayaan means? Like based on the explanation that I gave you right now, it's Chandra is moon and Yan is craft. I'm not sure why that's not working, but okay. Uh, Chandra is moon and Yan is craft. So Chandrayaan literally translates to mooncraft. And so India's Chandrayaan 3 mission was mooncraft number 3. Uh, and similarly, Mangalyaan is literally translates to Marscraft. And our upcoming Shukrayaan translates to Venuscraft. So it's a very simple yet elegant naming scheme, and one that is scaling to virtually any mission that you can think of.
And how many, I'll get the word wrong, but how many Gaganyauts will be able to be in the capsule, that the initial capsule?
So the initial capsule will have two Gagan Yatris on them, and this will be the case for at least the first 2 or 3 missions. And after that, we can expand to three astronauts pretty easily because the crew module is being made to keep 3 astronauts in a nominal condition and 4 astronauts in an emergency situation. But two is what we will start with because the initial missions are short duration, and so for short duration missions, you don't really need to have 3 astronauts to be able to complete the mission. So that's the initial plan. And of course, like one of the reasons to also do this gradually is once you have all of the pieces set and proven, like so let's say come 2030, when we would have hopefully flown astronauts to space multiple times over in various types of mission scenarios and for various types of experiments and so on and so forth. So now, and we would have also stress tested the spacecraft systems, and we would have flown the human rated launch vehicle multiple times. So come 2030, when all of this is done, the idea is that then you could do an accelerated approach similar to China's approach, where you would then want to have a space station. So we do intend to have a space station. The notional plan for it right now is 2035, but that may be like a few years off here and there. But the idea is that once you have all of these pieces proven, you could accelerate that and start to build bigger pieces. But at the end of the day, this is the fundamentals are what count the most. And so I think hopefully we'll get that right fast enough, and then we'll see.
AJ, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just, well, one of the question I was, well, Bill already asked, but I want to say also isn't Gaganyaan the same thing as space station? It's a space station. Is that not right?
Uh, no, not really. So yan is craft, right?
Yeah,
In Hindi, especially, right? So yan is craft and gagan is sky. So it's sky craft. So it's a spacecraft essentially, but it's not a space station, right?
hmm. But then is there a different name for space station?
Yes, yes, yes. It's called BUS, and it's abbreviated. It's an abbreviation for Bharatiya Antariksh Station. So Bharatiya for the other viewers is Indian. It translates to Indian in Hindi. Antariksh is space, and
The
station is
space,
station.
right?
So Bharatiya Antariksh Station is abbreviates as BAS,
Yes.
and so that's the name of the upcoming space station.
Okay. Now it looks to me like India has kind of fallen behind more in last 3 years behind China. I'm talking about when it seemed like with Chandrayaan three, or is it yeah, three? It was catching up, a little bit better. So is that also the feeling that people have there in ISRO and other places?
So I would say that, I mean, absolutely, China is farther ahead than India in terms of its overall space exploration capabilities. In fact, based on my tracking of their moon missions and like the variety of moon missions that China has done, including the sample return missions and Farside missions, which are one of its kind, and so on and so forth. So across all of this, in fact, I would go as far as to say that China has surpassed even the US in terms of moon missions in the current century, as far as the current century is concerned. So broadly speaking, yes, absolutely, China is farther ahead than India. I don't think there should be any shred of doubt about that. As far as the realization is concerned, yes, I mean many people, even especially in the Indian policy circles, do understand and recognize the fact that India is not no longer on par with China. Whereas if you were to, take a snapshot of uh, the two nations' space activities, let's say circa 2000, or 1990s, or even early 2000s, right? During that time, India and China were sort of neck on neck
Yeah,
in
sort of.
terms
Yeah.
of growing their capabilities. But since then, the gap has really widened, and China has, in
Yeah.
fact, again started to, surpass the US as well in certain areas
Yes.
of space. So yeah, India has fallen behind from that lens for sure. But it's something for the Indian policy makers and the government union cabinet to figure out if it's a goal that they want to pursue. My sense of the based on my reporting and and how ISRO operates and how the budgets are decided and so on and so forth. So my sense is that they do want to uh, catch up in certain areas, but not in every single area. So and that's mostly down to budget because India's budget is approximately been for the last 5 years, it's been mostly the same. So it's been about
Mm.
$1.5 billion USD. That's less
Mm.
than a tenth of the budget of NASA, even after the budget cuts that have been incurred this
Mhm.
year. So even after NASA's recent budget cuts, you are still looking at a budget that's less than a tenth of NASA's budget, as well as less than a tenth of China, sorry, China's overall space budget. So with that kind of a budget not really growing and India having other priorities as a nation as well, uh, we don't expect to accelerate on that front for the sake of catching up on every single front. But there are areas we do certainly prioritize. For example, the moon is one of the priority areas where our next mission is going to be a sample return mission. So after Chandrayaan 3 as a landing mission, we are going straight for a sample return. So Chandrayaan 4, which will launch as of the current timeline, it's expected to launch in 2028. And that's a sample return mission. I have written about it in Moon Monday 241. So you can look up more there. But
Yeah.
essentially, the idea is we'll go straight to the South Pole. And the South Pole is where no one has
Mhm.
operated spacecraft for a meaningful amount of time before, much less bought samples from. And since all the future crewed missions are going to converge in and around the lunar South Pole, if the idea is that if you have lunar samples bought from there
Mhm.
on Earth, it will be in huge demand across the globe. And you by the virtue of having that, it elevates your the importance of your mission as well as the
Mhm.
scientific output that you can generate, as well as buy you a seat on the space resources table in terms of negotiations and so on and so forth. So the idea is that we will prioritize that and while not necessarily accelerating on every other front. This is just an example, but I hope it illustrates the point well that with this sort of a constrained budget, you have to be a little creative to be able to get certain things at the expense of certain others, but prioritize what you really want.
Yeah. But I mean, you did say that was about 1/10 of NASA's budget. But when you include PPP, the parity, purchasing power parity, it is much more than 1/10. It's
Yeah,
probably more like half or something like that. So still it is half, but it still is not that bad with other cheaper options available. And we also obviously have been making. I mean, India has been making a case for Chandrayaan 3, which was done for $64 million, which was, a lot cheaper than what United States does. So, that is PPP uh, parity. So, in that sense, I would say that India should have progressed more, and it's not really just the lack of. It may not be. It may be somewhat the lack of funding, but it also is somewhat lack of full policy and excitement. And it seemed like Modi was very excited when Chandrayaan 3 landed. And, he obviously came from South Africa and he came straight to Bangalore and all the other places and was very excited. They made that day as a space day, National Space Day, and all that kind of thing. I hope that kind of excitement continues, you know. in India?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So budget is only one part of it for sure. But it's a major part. Even after you account for TPP, the
Yeah.
differences are still quite wide because there are some things that you simply cannot do without the appropriate budget, no matter how economical or efficient we are, right? And it's
Mhm.
also linear
Mhm.
organization. So, it's NASA and CNSA work in multiple parallel streams whereas ISRO works mostly on a linear mode. So that also is a different mindset. And one of the reasons for that mindset is the original goals that the Indian space program had of self-sufficiency with respect to civilian applications. So its planetary exploration is very new to India. So we should not forget that,
Mhm.
India just launched its first planetary mission ever in 2008. So it's very new to planetary exploration as a whole. So there are uh, a lot of the pieces of India's space program are not exactly optimized for planetary exploration particularly. So it's also that element. And there's also certainly political elements, as you alluded to. So it's a mix of many things for sure. It's not just the budget. But it's also the budget, right? So what I would urge everyone thinking about this is to also read this piece of mine that I published recently, where I try to examine the state of India's launch vehicles and do sort of like a checklist card of what was promised, what we got, and when we got it, and that gives you a reasonable window, in my opinion, to as to what really halts ISRO's progress
Right.
on an engineering and budget from an engineering as well as a budgetary standpoint. So yeah, I mean it's a mix of things for sure, and we could certainly always do better. I mean, I don't think any space program is perfect, right? So there's always
Yeah.
room for improvement, and we could certainly do better on many fronts. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's the gist of my take.
Jatan,
John,
go ahead.
go ahead, David.
I was going to ask you what specifically are India's space program 5 year and 10 year goals when you look at it going out 10 years from now, what is that, 36? What does the India space program want to do, accomplish? Do they want to compete with the US or China or Russia or I don't know, ESA? What are their sort of intermediary and then longer term goals?
So for the next 5 years, it is one is Chandrayaan 4 sample return, which I spoke about. Then there's Chandrayaan 5, which is a collaboration with the Japanese Space Agency. The mission is similar to NASA's Viper rover, wherein it will land on the moon's south pole and it will explore water ice by directly entering and exploring permanently shadowed regions, which has not been done before. That's Chandrayaan 5. So between Chandrayaan 4 and 5, India expects to be in a very strong position, at least in the US bloc, as far as the US bloc is concerned, to be able to have a good assessment of lunar volatiles, and that should help us scientifically as well as help us figure out how to plan the next steps of human exploration, not just from an Indian perspective but also from a US perspective. Then looking beyond the moon, you obviously have human spaceflight, which we also spoke about. So the idea is that other than maintaining at least a basic cadence of human spaceflight missions, like one every year or so, or one every 6 months or so, you would also have the first module of the eventual space station ready by the end of the decade. At least that's what the plan is. And then you also have a Venus orbiter in the works, which as of now is being targeted for a 2028 launch because that's when the next window is available from an orbital mechanics standpoint. So that's the Shukrayaan orbiter, and it's a full-fledged reconnaissance orbiter, sort of similar to, Magellan, but like in the modern 21st century context. So if all goes to plan, it should reach Venus in 2028 itself, and it should arrive before NASA's and ESA's Venus orbiters respectively. But also, since it will have a lifespan of a few years at least, it will overlap with both NASA's and ESA's orbiters should they launch on time. And then you would have a situation where all of these orbiters are coexisting at the Earth's twin planet, and there are plans being made between scientists of PIs of these missions that they would want to coordinate certain observations because each orbiter has its own advantages. So that's being planned as well. On the rocket front, we are going to have an upgrade for the LVM-3. So LVM-3 again is Launch Vehicle Mark III. It's India's most powerful rocket. That's the rocket that will launch the human spaceflight missions. That's the rocket that launched Chandrayaan 2 and 3 as well, and so on. So it's India's most powerful rocket. You can see a picture of it right here. And the core stage of it, which is in the center, that currently is not Keralox. It's not semi-cryogenic. So it's using traditional fuels. And so this will be upgraded to a semi-cryogenic engine, which will boost its performance and its efficiency both. And the work is also ongoing on having multiple engine restarts, especially for the upper stage. And so that allows you to not just put and deploy heavier payloads in space compared to what India is capable of doing now, but also to deploy them in complex orbits because that's what an upper stage that can reignite allows you to do, similar to the ULA's Centaur upper stage, for example. So we'll have like a mini Centaur, so to speak, if that explains it better. So yeah, that's essentially what we are looking at on the front of India's rocket systems in the next 5 years. But it's in the next 10 years that things get much more interesting because you have India is working on a much more powerful rocket, which right here in this article I have a graphic of. Uh, yes. So this is an illustration of the upcoming NGLV rocket. It's called the Next Generation Launch Vehicle. And it's a cryogenic rocket. Um, and so it has good performance, and it like at its even in its base configuration it will have almost thrice the performance of LVM-3. So it will be squarely in the heavy lift category. So in terms of its performance characteristics compared to, let's say, a US launch vehicle, I would put it as somewhere around the Delta 4 heavy category, but without having three core sticks. It will do that with a single stick itself. So this will be a substantially large rocket, and it will be in the heavy lift category, and it will also have a heavier version with strap-on boosters to sort of put it in the upper heavy lift category, similar to the new Glenn. So the NGLV super heavy, so to speak, will be having a lift mass to LEO as well as to GTO in the approximate range of where New Glenn is currently, without its expansion plans, without considering the expansion plans of the New Glenn itself. So that's for the next 10 years. So the developmental flight for NGLV is currently being targeted for uh, circa 2032. And if that goes well, you would have this rocket operational sometime in 2033 or 2034. And so that is when you would have this heavy lift rocket. And in the meanwhile, you would have the semi-cryogenic LVM-3. So that's sort of the outlook for rockets. When we take the outlook in the next 10 years, you also have a proliferation of Earth observation satellites. So there's a whole plan of having multiple Earth observation satellites expanded to bigger constellations. You also want to have a navigation constellation. So currently, India has something called NAVIC, which is its own navigation and timing satellite constellation. It's in a very bare bones state right now. It's like it's in a very basic state right now with only the minimum number of satellites required to provide a navigation service in the Indian subcontinent. So this will be expanded upon with future launches. So over the next 10 years, you will see this expand into like continental scale constellation and eventually into a global one as well. But that is not the plan just yet in terms of approved budgets. So right now, the as opposed to, let's say, um, Galileo or GLONASS or GPS or Beidou. Uh, India's Navig is not a global navigation constellation. It's a regional navigation constellation, which can interoperate with GPS. So the purpose is a bit different. So in that sense, scaling to global is not a priority of, at least not an immediate priority in any case. So that's what we are looking at on that front. And am I missing anything? There's also Mangalyaan as well, of course. So we launched Mangalyaan 1 in 2014 with a Mars orbiter, and the next step would be a Mars lander. However, that mission has not been approved yet from the Indian Government Union Cabinet. So work on that is ongoing, and once that approval comes, is only when we can start building that. So that's the other thing that's happening. There's also work going on the SSA front because as we know that the Earth orbital space is also a growing debris problem. So there is a need that is immediately apparent even in the ISRO policy circles as well as the astrodynamic circles, that we would not just need to track satellites from the perspective of launches and basic operations. We would need full-fledged space situational awareness capabilities, similar to what China and US and Russia have. So that work is also ongoing, and that can be expected to slowly come out over the next 10 years. So that's what we are looking at in terms of this. And of course, as we also spoke, by 2035, there's also a plan to have a space station, or at least several elements of it. So, you have a somewhat basic space station in Earth orbit for sure. And that is also when around the time when you would have the next set of Chandrayaan missions. So we only spoke about Chandrayaan 4 and 5. That's by the end of this decade. But the moment you enter the next decade, you also have Chandrayaan 6, 7, and 8, which would be increasingly complex. And the idea is that you would want to build all of this up to an eventual human mission to the moon as well. So that goal has been announced by the Prime Minister last year, to send a human to the moon, an Indian to the moon specifically, by 2040. So it's a timeline later than the Chinese and the US, but it's also a more realistic timeline because we can't announce a date of 2030 and expect to actually meet that, because that's just preposterous. So 2040 is more of a realistic yet aspirational timeline and something that we can actually try working towards. So that's ultimately the reason for building all of this: a heavy lift launch vehicle, a heavier version of that, space station, human spaceflight program, increasingly complex Chandrayaan missions, growing space situational awareness capabilities, scientific efforts across all of these missions, planetary missions, the tracking capabilities involved in that. So all of this, when you look at it, we can converge into a human mission to the moon. So that's like the broader arch that is being looked at, and the main challenge will be to prioritize specific projects that help you progress towards that goal in a realistic yet fast-paced manner.
I know everyone, we got about 15 minutes left because we promised an hour. Bill, you wanted to say something?
Uh, yes, during your discussion with AJ, sort of doing some comparison of the Chinese program to the Indian program, it occurred to me that the Chinese program had the benefit of leveraging a great deal of Russian design, both for their spacecraft and for their space station. Does India have that kind of partnership in the development arena with any other nations? Is that something that they benefit from?
So that's a very good question, I think, because so India does have good ties with Russia, although not in the same sense as China's ties with Russia. So India does do and has benefited from tech transfers from from Roscosmos in the past. So, for example, okay, let me just give you a quick example. So the core stage engine which powers the LVM-3, it's called the Vikas engine, and parts of it are derived from the European Viking engine, for example. And the upper stage cryogenic engine on the LVM-3 is derived from one of the I forget which one, but it's one of the Russian engines used in their rockets. So it's a derivative of that. So it's not a complete like transfer of technology. It's more like we give you like a high level blueprint and we help you with some things, but then you figure out the rest of the stuff. So it's more like a technology aid rather than a technology transfer. So our relations with Russia are of that sort, where we in return for in return for the technology aid, we compensate them by purchasing the rights to use those things and having other space deals and so on. So it's more of a pragmatic situation rather than a close tie. But other than that, we don't really have close tie-ups with any nation per se. We do have lots of collaboration, but we don't have those kinds of tie-ups that you mentioned, including with the US. So the US has also been a long-time partner of India in space, including from the start of our space program in the late 1960s, all the way up to the recent times. And of course, you know about the NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar satellite, NISAR satellite that launched late last year, which is a symmetric collaboration between the two agencies, which is a fantastic thing. So that those ties are of course there, but with the US, there's also the problem of ITAR, right? Like the US is extremely protective of its IP, and does not share even things that are not necessarily bound by it. But like, so it's not something that we get any help from. So it's not a medium that we get help from. So essentially, like to put it in to capture it in short, short of a few licensing based deals with Russia, we don't really get any direct tech transfer help from anyone. And that's also part of the reason why it takes time to develop and operationalize these things.
Thank you.
AJ, go ahead.
Yeah, like your article said that your space program is only as fast as the rockets or as quickly as rockets move. One of the problems that I see is that India does not seem to be focusing on any reusable spacecraft, at least reusable first stage. I don't know why. Why not? And actually China is doing it. Land Space, I guess, is obviously a
Yeah.
private company which is just flew and more or less successfully, and they are going to fly again in a few months. So I just don't, it's just not possible to be able to go and do all these things at a much cheaper rate without reusable, at least reusable first stage rocket. And one of the things that have been talking about and have proposed is something, I think it was Sonath or somebody who said that we need to not necessarily build a bigger and bigger rocket, but combine the upper stages in LEO, and then that way you can, move much faster, etc. Now, the prerequisite for being able to combine upper stages in LEO is that the first stage has to be reusable, more or less. So that, I mean, that's a more or less prerequisite. Oh, it is a prerequisite. Otherwise, it still is not, cheap enough. But why is it that India is not developing the reusable first stage that obviously New Glenn is, obviously SpaceX has been doing for a long time, and China is doing it too now.
Right. So yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, reusable rockets are a no-brainer at this point. To have at least one, if not like, a whole lot of them. So they are absolutely a no-brainer. But if I were to evaluate why it has not been done, so it's been for mostly for a bunch of reasons from my perspective. Again, it's just my opinion based on my reporting and so on. But my sense based on tracking ISRO's progress and priorities is that one is, of course, the budget, but also more specifically, there has been for a long time a backlog of missions across the navigation satellites, Earth observation satellites, Chandrayaan 3 commercial missions, and so on and so forth. So, with this backlog, and with the current capacity that India's rockets had, and of course, a reusable rocket is not just going to manifest itself overnight. So between all of those things, the budgetary allocations were being made towards existing rockets to just prepare them for flight and get those missions going. But that came at the expense of developmental work needed for reusable rockets. So it's sort of like a either or situation where that they had to deal with, while not obviously not ideal and obviously not what you should have been doing ideally. You should ideally be just doing both. So obviously that's the case, but this is what the situation was and has been for the past at least 10 years, where the backlog of spacecraft has been larger than the ability to deliver, and nobody really prioritized development of reusable rockets in the meanwhile. But that has actually manifested in the last few years. So allow me to point you to back to the NGLV rocket. So one fact about it that I did not explicitly mention was that
Hmm.
the booster stage is reusable, will be reusable. So
Mm.
the NGLV booster
Oh,
stage, you
okay.
can see the Falcon 9 like
I can
design
see yeah, I can
right
see
here
the
in the
landing legs.
illustration. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's a very obviously Falcon 9 SQ design, or a reusable booster SQ design if you want. Either way, so this will be a reusable booster. Maybe not in the first flight, absolute like not from the first flight itself, but eventually it will be a reusable booster. So that's definitely on the cards. It's just that the realization timeline is longer than anyone would have liked, but it's what it is, and there have already been case studies done on trying to make the core stage of this one of the LVM3 reusable,
Oh.
but the
Hmm.
benefits are very, very minimal. So, for example, the LVM3 is a very unusual rocket if you compare it to any of the other Western rockets, right? So the core stage design is liquid fueled, but the side boosters, the huge side boosters, are solid fueled,
Solid,
and
yeah.
then you have the cryogenic upper state. So it's like a Frankenstein of a rocket, so to speak.
Hmm.
But so if you make the core stage of this reusable somehow, right?
Hmm.
But the cost benefit is very less. It's
Yeah,
essentially you'll essentially lose in trying to refurbish the hardware. So it doesn't make sense to do this for this rocket, but case studies have been done. So like ISRO has actually evaluated this already and ruled it out as a feasible measure.
makes
But
sense.
with
Yeah.
the NGLV, you are starting a design from scratch, and so you do
Hmm.
have the ability to build something reusable from the get-go. So this will be reusable, and also there will be a NGLV super heavy version, which will be used for human missions to the moon. This will also have all of the three boosters reusable, or in the most extreme scenarios, the core booster will be reusable, but the other two won't be, similar to the Falcon Heavy situation, for example. So yeah, reusability is on the cards, but you just have to wait for it. There's no other way around it, unfortunately.
But it's I mean, it's a very
So
important thing for them to
yeah,
take on.
I agree. I agree.
Even
So
with
the
a
other
small
thing is that,
rocket, you have to at least get experience behind you
right.
and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, I
sorry, Bill,
agree,
you
but
want, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
I'll just add quickly to that, which is the other aspect, which is you mentioned docking of upper stages, right?
yes,
So
right,
they are
yeah.
also trying to think in that direction. In fact, also with docking of spacecraft itself. So, like for example, Chandrayaan 4 will this is the spacecraft stack for Chandrayaan 4. You have the lander, you have the ascent module, you have the propulsion module, and so on. So the Chandrayaan 4 spacecraft stack weighs nearly 10,000 kilograms, and that's twice the capacity of India's LVM-3 rocket. And so,
Mhm.
unlike China, which could launch a single Long March 5 rocket and bring samples from the moon. India cannot do that because the spacecraft stack is just too massive. So what they have decided is that instead of waiting around for 10 years for a heavier rocket to be
Yeah.
available, we'll just launch two of them and have the modules dock in
Exactly.
Earth orbit and then go
Right.
from there, right? And then,
Mhm.
incidentally, this idea has also led to another, which is India will not intentionally invest in a super heavy lift rocket, the kind that Saturn V is or the kind that the SLS is, because
Mhm.
what we have realized is that those rockets have no use outside of human moon missions. And as a
Exactly.
as a country uh, that still spends most of the space budget on civilian space applications, we do
Mhm.
not deem it to be a reasonable thing to do. So what we have instead decided is that we'll make a upper class heavy lift GLV rocket, and that
Mhm.
will be like nearly super heavy lift, but not quite. And what we'll do is we'll just do the same thing, which is launch multiples of those and then have those elements dock and then go ahead. But then the same rocket can be reutilized for many other space missions. So I think that if you wait around for, let's say, 10 years from now, you will see India's rocket situation to be relatively far better than what it is now. But we have to wait. There's no other way.
Not sure if I'm going to be around for 10 more years, but no, just kidding.
John, I know you've written many more articles about the moon than you have about the Indian space program, so I want to give you a chance to talk about Luna for a second. What were
Yeah.
your top three stories from 2025?
Uh, well, that's a lot. So let's see. For the moon, one was definitely uh, covering lunar sample science updates from Hong Kong. So
Mm.
because China recently got like fresh samples from the moon from Chang'e 5 and 6, and these samples are from geologically unique regions where we don't have samples either from Apollo or from Luna. And Chang'e 6 in particular is from the moon's far side, which we have no other samples from. So these have resulted in like a huge wave of lunar science results, which have completely changed our understanding of the moon's evolution and have also led to future moon missions from any country. It doesn't matter which country it is, to recalibrate what they expect to observe and what they should observe on the moon to advance science. So, in that sense, these set of science results from Chang'e 5 and 6 have been very important to cover. So I went to a symposium in Hong
Yeah.
Kong in November, talking explicitly about just lunar sample science results. And there were people from the international community as well, including those whose proposals have been selected to study Chang'e 5 samples, because China has started dispersing samples that they have gotten from the moon to other countries as well. So I got to see the samples and I got to cover all these science results as well. So this is the edition in which I've covered the science results that the researchers presented, along with links to their papers, contextualizing the importance of those results. So I think if you remember Moon Monday 252,
Yeah.
that would be the one that I loved the most across the year. Uh, there's also like the year-end thing, which I do like every year, because I think that people on the internet have a really short memory, especially these days. And people tend to forget what not only what we have achieved, but more importantly, they keep focusing on what we are about to do. But I think that it doesn't make much sense because I always see these articles on various outlets, not picking on any outlet in particular, but I just see them across the board that, oh, this is what we'll do in 2026, this is what we'll do in 2027, and so on. But what about what we already did, right? I mean, who is going to remember that? Because at the end of the day, these are the capabilities that you actually have, as opposed to what you project about what you will have, right? And not all missions go the way that we intend them to. So what I do is every year on Moon Monday, the last edition is a special one where I provide all of the updates, whether be it successes or be it failures or be it somewhere in between. I characterize them all and contextualize them on all and divide them by organize them by country or region. So you have this sort of a lay of the lunar exploration land, so to speak, along with lots of links to papers and previous coverage. So this is like a good snapshot of everything that happened in the year, and including the failure. So I also make it an explicit point to not just call out failures in the per region or country setting, but also to call it out as a separate section, because I don't think that we can make realistic progress without this. But at the same time, like, also appreciate the efforts that were made to make more progress. So that's also there. So that I highlight at the same time, to be fair, right? So that's the other thing that I would say would be my highlight. I know it's sort of like a cheat answer, because this just covers everything, but I think this is important to do. And the other one is that I like is on 1 second is okay. I can't really recall, but um, there was one somewhere here. Um, okay, yeah, I did one on the orbit part, which I'm not. Okay, I found it. So there's this. Um, there's this analysis piece that I did on the current orbital capabilities of the US, and as well as that of other countries, including India, and so on. And because most of these orbiters are old, including the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, it's very old at this point. It's gracefully aged, to be fair, but at the same time, it's no longer in an orbit that is looking straight down at the poles because its gyroscope doesn't function the way it used to. And so you are not in a position to make any new major observations out of it. And so if you are planning the next wave of Artemis crewed missions, uh, you simply do not have an orbiter at least an orbiter that is native to the US to be able to do that planning. And also, when you combine it with the fact that all of the US missions that have gone in the last 5 years or 10 years to study water ice on the moon directly or indirectly, all of them have failed, which is not something that the Western media likes to talk about a lot, or even recognizes it, I think. But either way, it's a failure on their part, frankly. So I also try to capture that, to say that bottom line is that you don't know where the water ice is, you don't know what the state of it is, you don't know the characteristics of it, you don't know the physical and chemical nature of it. So on what basis are you going to actually plan realistic human exploration missions that will actually sustain? Whereas China, with its Chang'e 7 mission launching later this year, followed 2 years later by Chang'e 8, uh, which we know for a fact will be successful because their track record speaks for themselves, will have a much better hold on the nature, accessibility, and abundance of lunar water ice. So, from that context, if you look at the vacuum of orbital imagery available, as well as that is not expected to be filled, I make the case for why this is a issue to be addressed as sort of as an immediate priority from the entire US bloc front. So this is the one article that I would say would be one of my favorite ones for the year.
I have a
Jatan,
question about this. How do you budget in India? I mean, we mainly budget year by year in the U.S. in terms of they have long line plans, but do you budget year by year, or do you actually commit to multi-year when you make a decision?
So it's on a year-by-year basis, but the way
Hmm.
the budgets are counted for space missions are a little different than how they are counted for NASA missions. For example, NASA missions have a per mission budget allocated to them, and certain infrastructure work that's outside the scope of those missions directly is budgeted for separately. But with India, with Indian space missions, if let's say I build a deep space antenna as part of uh, the requirements for, let's say, the Chandrayaan mission, a Chandrayaan mission, then that budget is included in the Chandrayaan 3 mission budget, which is not the case with the US. So it's just a different way of counting, essentially, which is why the reason I point this out is that it's not, it's a bit like comparing apples to oranges when you compare the two missions. But otherwise, it's done on a year-to-year basis. So on that front, it's similar.
Okay.
Jatan, I know we're over the hour that we asked you to be with us today and how late it is in India. Do you have any closing comments, anything you would like to leave us? What are your plans for the coming year?
Yeah, so just two things. One is this is the related article to the last one about where I document as to the lapses of the US in trying to study lunar water despite it being the principal goal of Artemis. So coming to the second part, which is what are my aspirations for this year for space coverage? Well, it's pretty much the same. I'll just keep on covering moon missions every week from across the globe and try to sort of just both create a lot of interest within the reader base, which is from the space industry at large, but also from the education sector. So both create interest, but as well as keep the journalistic hat on to critique where you must, because that's the only way we can really move forward. So I just look forward to like the next set of moon missions. I'm supremely excited about Chang'e 7 because Chang'e 7 is a full-fledged reconnaissance mission across the orbiter, the lander, the rover, the hopper, and so on. So I think it's an incredible instrument suite, and any lunar researcher would be very excited at the prospect of what its data is going to teach us about the moon south pole. So I'm excited about that, but I'm also excited about other missions like Intuitive Machines has their third moon landing attempt mission. I hope they are successful this time. So that's something that I'm hoping for and wishing for. And the place they are going to is also very interesting, which is a magnetic place on the moon. It's called Reiner Gamma, and it's a swirl feature, which is not something we have explored before. So I think that would be very interesting to look at. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like so, it's more of the like how many of these missions come together is something that I am interested in covering as a whole. And of course, on the Indian space front as well, there's a lot to look out for because one obvious thing would be the first uncrewed flight of the entire Gaganyaan system. So that's taking place sometime this year. So the coverage of that would be a priority for me from that perspective. So that I'm looking forward to, but also like tracking the progress on Chandrayaan 4 and 5, which ISRO doesn't really talk about much, but you have to work your way in and figure that out. So that's something that you have to do. And there would also be some focus on tracking the progress of the semi-cryogenic engine upgrade for the LVM-3 because that's one important development that we hope to achieve in 2027. But 2026 is when we'll progress through the tests of it. So it will be important to monitor to see, how we are doing there. Other than that, since I published the, poetry booklet, one thing that I'm excited about is publishing more booklets on space. So that this is not a one and done thing. So the idea is that I will be publishing more booklets and books about space. So for 2026, I would like to do at least one, if not two. I'm yet to decide as to what that topic will be, but I will decide it at some point this month and then work my way towards, completing that and then releasing that towards the end of the year, if not before that. So do look out for that. And the intention is that that will also be free. So similar to the whole of my website essentially. So Moon Monday is free to access, Indian Space newsletter is free to access, all other articles are free to access, the poetry booklet is free to access, but obviously it's not free to produce. So the way my site is run is is sustained by sponsorships. So organizations can sponsor, individuals can sponsor. Ajay here has been a kind sponsor as well for quite a few editions of Moon Monday. So I sustain based on sponsorship. So you see this support section on my website. So here I list out my sponsorship options and like the organizations that sponsor my work, as well as the many individuals that have supported my work. So I run on sponsorships, and that is the way that everyone else gets to access this information for free, which I think is important. I want to keep it free because it's an important aspect of making journalism accessible to everyone. But the only way that can happen is if people show up to support. So that would be my request, that if any of you readers get value out of reading my work, I would urge you to consider supporting either as an individual or as an organization. And that would be my closing comment.
Thank you very much
Yes,
for being with us.
I will support it. I will support it again,
Thank
Jatan.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you so
One
much.
last thing, a small thing. We mentioned about Mars and stuff, and you said it'll be a Mars Monday, maybe 10 years from now, but it should really be Mars Tuesday, because Tuesday is Mars Day, and
Fair.
that way you can keep
So
your Moon
Mangalwar,
Monday
yes.
inside and Mars on the other side,
Fair,
next day.
fair. So in India or in Hindi, Mangalwar is the name for Tuesday, and Mangal is literally
Yeah.
Mars, and Var is day. So Tuesday is literally Mars Day.
Mhm.
So that's a fair point. So maybe there should be a Mars Tuesday at some point. But I said 2 decades, not a single decade. But don't
I
hold
know.
me on to it. Uh, but yeah, maybe someday, or maybe I can help someone else start that, and maybe I can. That is one thing that where I can actually guide someone to do it, unlike poetry where I can't. But this is something that I can guide someone to do it. So if any of your prospective listeners are interested to start a Mars Tuesday, I would be more than happy to guide them do that.
Thank
And if no one starts it,
I'm much more interested in Moon anyway, so I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
really
I mean, I mean, me too, right? But I wouldn't
yeah.
rule it out for sure. Mars is very interesting. I completely agree. It's just that it's been covered well enough already, so I don't really see as an independent writer me trying to spend even more time trying to earn value out of it. So that's mostly just a focus logic. But anyway, so yeah, we'll see about Mars at some point for sure. Uh, Maybe when the Moon to Mars transition happens or something like that. But we'll see about that.
thank you all again, and Jatan, thank you, and I look forward to talking to you again. Listeners, hang around for a minute. I have a couple of space show announcements to make. But again, we want to thank Jatan for being with us and doing this late at night, and the same thing for AJ. So, listeners, if you are looking for the future programs of the space show, we have open lines on Sunday. And for some reason, January and early February are filling up like hotcakes. But early January, I think people are still on vacation. So I do have early January dates, but everybody, I made a mistake. I gave them all of January and most of February. And what do? They pick February and everything in January, but early January. So there are some January dates if you're, of people that you think should be on the space show. Please email me. Also, we thrive on guest suggestions, so they're always welcome. But when you send them, it would be really great if you give me contact information because sometimes they're not so public and it's hard to find an email address or a website or something like that for them. So do keep that in mind. Our annual campaign did end, but I do want to say that tax laws changed. So for those of you that perhaps do not itemize a tax return and you would like a tax deduction, you can get that as we are a nonprofit by continuing to not itemize, but to donate to us in 2026. And also for donors of $100 or more, you are invited to join the advisory board Not everybody does that, but you are invited. You just need to contact me. We do have openings, and you get invitations to our Zoom meetings. So you don't have to get every single invitation, but if you see on the newsletter a guest, hey, that sounds interesting. I'd like to be in the Zoom room. If you're one of those major donors, then just email me and I send you the Zoom invitation. And so our needs are ongoing. We did not make our full 2026 operational goal. So I will be continuing to ask for support. Sponsorships are fine, and we do have available sponsorships. And remember, we're now a multi-formatted program with YouTube, Substack, and continuing to use audio on our Space Show website. So this is the start of the year. So I hope everybody had a great holiday season. Time to get back to reality, I guess, and starting off the new year. So still always look up and always be safe and watch out for the other guy if you do a lot of driving. And come back on Sunday, open lines. And again, thank you to Jatan and AJ and Bill and John Hunt and John Jossi for sending in questions since he was unable to join us. Until Sunday, everybody, goodbye from the Space Show.